Hi, welcome to NDE TV. I'm Peggy Robinson. Today's guest is Mie Potter. Did I say your name right?
Mie.
Mie, I'm sorry. It's a beautiful name. And she has not told her near-death experience publicly before. It happened a long time ago, and I'm very excited for her to share her story. Hi.
Hi. So thank you for this opportunity to start speaking my story. I have actually shared it with friends, but I've never shared it in a format where the whole public can see it. So understandably, I'm a little bit nervous about it, but I also know that the God moves and God leads, so that's where I'm going from. And obviously, it's a God experience, it's a near-death experience, right?
Right.
So there's a little bit of backup that I feel I need to share, and it's only a year from when I had my experience. So through not any planning of my own, I end up being a stay-at-home mom to my two sons, and it was, it is, and probably always will be the single best experience that I've ever had because I don't anticipate being the grandma who raises my grandkids. So at any rate, it's coming from a place of I was in a very beautiful space when things started to happen. And so in 2005, my oldest son was in fourth grade and my youngest son was in second grade. And we were just about to embark on a huge adventure with my oldest son. He was entering a competition called Destination Imagination. And it's one of those student-led experiences where parents are not supposed to influence the students at all. And it's actually part of being just qualified for the competition if they figure out that the parents are part of it. So a girlfriend of mine and I were, preparing to do this because we figured of all the parents, we were the ones who were least likely to steer our children. And the other parents also felt that the same way too. So we were actually meeting for our first time about how we were going to be as the parent advisors for these children. And it was at my house, and it was after a morning of um, meeting with a bunch of PTO presidents in our monthly meeting with the administration. So, typical, I was a typical like soccer mom kind of person and really absolutely loving life. Bible study leader, PTO president. I called myself a professional volunteer. And, I had done the normal thing, had coffee for breakfast because that's what we do. And I had taken Asiago bagels to the meeting because it was my turn to bring the treat for the meeting. And so I decided, oh, I haven't really eaten anything. I better eat one of these bagels, right? So I'm eating the Asiago cheese bagel, drinking lukewarm coffee with my girlfriend Susan. And I heard just this incredible, loud pop, like a backfire of a car, or maybe somebody shot off a rifle, or I mean, it was just incredibly loud. So I turned to Susan and I said, "Did you hear that?" And she looked at me so strange. She said, "I didn't hear anything. I heard the loudest, like backfire of a car or a gun going off." And she was just looking at me so strange. And I was like, I know I heard that. I mean, it was just so loud. And suddenly I was just incredibly nauseous. Like, so I ran to my powder room and I upchucked all over the walls as I was running into the room. And I thought, that is the quickest um, form of food poisoning that ever hit me because I figured I ate something bad on that Asiago cheese bagel or whatever. And so, I mean, it was just like my being very descriptive about it, like I entirely emptied my stomach and then kept on going. And I thought, what is going on? But the door was closed. So Susan knocks on the door. Can I do anything? It's almost time for the kids to get home from school on the bus. What do you want me to do? And I just turned to her, like, okay, pour me some red wine because that kills the bacteria. I'm pretty sure I have food poisoning. So she went and got it and she handed me the glass. And as she handed me the glass, my whole body went like this. So I was having a brain bleed, but I wasn't familiar with what actually happens. So she ended up, okay, number one, Susan saved my life. And I've credited her with that, many times over, and we don't even live near each other anymore, but I always tell everyone, Susan saved my life. So she called 911. She called my husband, and she ended up, how did it happen? She stayed, and just as the ambulance was wheeling me down the driveway, my son's bus pulled to the front of the cul-de-sac. Then the neighbor came out. In the long run, what ended up happening is Alan and then my younger son John stayed with the neighbor. Susan called my husband again, and then went and eventually got her daughter off the bus. And it was just this incredibly confusing, painful time, as in, physically painful. And yet, the only thing I remember from the experience after Susan handing me the glass of wine was the ambulance, the paramedics taking me down the driveway and the bus pulling up, and that is it. For the whole experience, that's all I remember. Until waking up on a gurney in the ICU part of the hospital. And one of the neurosurgical fellows sort of noticed that I was more lucid, and he came over and started talking to me. And he said, Mrs. Potter, you've had a brain bleed, and we've diagnosed you with this really rare medical disease, a really rare brain disease. But you're not going to die, Mrs. Potter. And I looked at him and said, no, I'm not dying. I'm not leaving my boys. He goes, that's right. You're not leaving your boys. And anyway, you've already had the thing that we try to prevent when you have this disease. And so you're not going to die. I said, no, I'm not dying. I mean, I knew for certain if I had anything to do with it and much pleading with God, I am not leaving my boys.
Well, it wasn't on your to-do list, was it?
No, totally not. And I'm going to tell you the most amazing thing, and this is the very beginning of me really being aware of prayer and God and everything in our life, is I could hear the prayers of everybody wherever who was praying for my recovery. I could hear it. And I couldn't hear distinct words. I could just hear the murmur. You know how you feel the prayers when people are really trying to intercede for you? And that was just, it's the beginning.
Beautiful.
It's not only is it beautiful, it's also like what helps me to help other people to, when they're in their medical emergencies, to help them to say, and I just say, I've been through it, and I heard the prayers of people interceding for me, and they're interceding for you in this time as well. And prayer is very powerful. So it was one of the things that I have developed, and it's because of this brain disease that I have that I didn't know I was developing. I have a dangerous level of being able to block out pain. And it turns out also physical pain. I mean, also emotional pain, but definitely physical pain. And
You have a high tolerance to pain?
I have an incredibly high tolerance beyond what we should have, right? And because a pain is a signal to us about a danger, right? Whether we're being injured or whatever, it's part of our self-defense. So why I wanted to tell you this is because it's a direct tie into a year later. I started to experience some symptoms based on this brain disease, which I was just even beginning to wrap my brain around. And there was an incident. I got up at night and I headed to the bathroom because, you know, when I wake up, I am automatically need to use restroom. So I got up out of bed and I headed to the bathroom, and suddenly I was falling down. And here's another miracle. This happened 3 times in about 2 weeks, and my husband caught me before I hit the ground every single time.
Wow.
And it was dark. You know, like I didn't turn on the light to go to the bathroom because he's a real light sleeper. I kind of like snuck out of bed and then I walked across the room. And just as I was falling, every single time he caught me.
He must be your soulmate.
Oh, well, he might be my soulmate, but we're no longer together.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And, you know, I'm laughing because I firmly believe that whatever was set in motion whenever, he was there for the time when I needed him to be there. And that was to save my life those times and also to help me get to the point where I could survive on my own. And he's with somebody else now, and that's totally fine. Like I wish him the best, right? But at any rate, 3 times in a row within 2 weeks, he caught me just as I was about to hit the ground. I mean, he must have like just taken a dive to catch me exactly then. So in other words, God intervened and said, hey, go get it, right? So the third time in the ER waiting for my neurosurgeon, we talked about how we should probably risk this brain surgery that everyone said I should have. And we had decided a year ago that I wasn't going to have the brain surgery because it's brain surgery and it's very risky. And it was at the time considered to be experimental treatment for this. And it's not a cure. It's just a way to not have any more strokes. So
Say strokes.
strokes. So the first one was a brain bleed, which is a stroke, but it's not caused by a clot. It's caused by the one that I had was caused by some little capillaries blowing out and bleeding. And one of the things about this brain bleed is that since it was capillaries blowing out, I just continued to bleed and bleed and bleed and bleed. And actually, there are people who have had brain bleeds who have died because it never stopped. So my brain bleed eventually stopped and I bled 10.5 ounces. And how I know it was 10.5 ounces because it was emptying into a beaker that I was staring at because they had me positioned on my belly and my head was looking at the beaker because that's how they had me positioned. So I watched every little drop coming out of the temporary shunt because that's all I could do. And eventually, when it began to slow down, they let me flip around and be on my back for a little while, and then they'd ask me to get back on my belly. It was quite the experience, and if I had a lower pain tolerance, it would have been a very painful experience, but I actually never noticed a headache at all. And one of the things that has helped clue me in that I don't have a normal pain tolerance is that they kept asking me if I had a headache, and I would say, I don't feel a headache at all. And I really didn't feel a headache at all. So going to 2006, I'm heading for a surgery, and it is again an emergency surgery, even though this one was planned. It's an emergency because like I had this thing happen in the ER and they said, we need to schedule you for surgery. And I had a test and then I had a surgery within a few days. And it turns out that my neurosurgeon scheduled me right before he was supposed to fly away for his Thanksgiving vacation. So, you know, it was definitely an emergency surgery. But I'm actually just so blessed that it all worked out, that it happened in time for him to be able to work me in for a surgery. Because let's say it had happened on Monday, he wouldn't have been able to work me in for a schedule, and then who knows, right? So at any rate, I had the surgery and it went really well. It went actually so well that they had decided to release me the next day. So the neurosurgeon left for his Thanksgiving vacation on the day I was supposed to be released. And the morning of, what had been the habit of my husband while I was in the hospital is that he would come in the morning and help me with breakfast, because my right hand was pretty much disabled because it had the IV. It had the PICC line and the IV in it. And so I'm not a lefty, so he would come and help me have breakfast. Then the nurses would help me with lunch, and he would come back and help me with dinner, and then go home and take care of the boys. And he came in that morning and, expecting maybe for me to be released. And he came in and he noticed that the area around my PICC line was all red and swollen. So he pointed that out to the nurse, and then of course he knew that I wasn't going to be released that day. So after they started to do whatever, put the antibiotic in my IV and all that, he headed back home and to back to work. Well, unknown to him, and I really don't remember this part, I had a massive stroke from a blood clot from the infection in my arm. And that is actually what led to my death. And the unfortunate part about it is that nobody ever contacted my ex-husband to let him know that I had had this experience. So nobody came to intervene for me to see how I was doing or whatever. And, as far as I mean, I really, to be honest, I have no idea what happened. I have no idea how long it took, because at the time that it happened, he and I both decided we were not going to pursue any kind of legal action against the hospital. We attributed it to a very bad mistake, that nobody was watching to know that I was going to have this stroke, and that nobody called him. But we don't operate on the idea that they don't make mistakes, right? So at any rate, and at some point, and probably in the very near future, I will dig into my records to find out how long all the timing of it, but I just don't know. And to a certain extent, it's really not that important. What is important is actually what happened during the time that I died. But it's also wondrous, and it's also, to me, it's why I'm back here. And that is, I was surrounded by God's glory, and it was a pure white light that was just so bright, it probably would have hurt you, except it's God, so it didn't hurt you. And just so much comfort and so much love. I just surrounded by love, just well-being, just the best, just the, now that I'm back, of course I miss it, right? And you probably have a similar thing, but I can't tell you how long it was. What I can tell you is that it was the most beautiful, peaceful, wonderful experience I've ever had in my life, or my not life. And he said, "You can come home now." And it was a male voice, and everybody can believe whatever they want, but that's what I heard. I heard a male voice telling me I could come home now. I can't, my guys. That's exactly what I said, because I knew I wasn't leaving my babies just to be raised by their dad. And it's no thing against their dad, but I was a stay-at-home mom. I'm the nurturer of my family. I'm the cheerleader of my family. I'm the one who makes sure everyone has clean laundry and lunch and all that stuff. And I was not leaving if I had a choice. But he knew I was going to say that, right? Because he knows, right? So I was back. I was back and I was aware of, my eyes weren't open yet, but I was aware of hearing very agitated voices and aware of a whole lot of pain. And when I thought about the pain, it was in my arm and in my head. And I can't tell you exactly like how long it took me to open my eyes or, what those first experiences were, because my mind is not letting me remember that yet, because it was incredibly painful. That is what I do remember. It's like how I told you I have evolved so that I have an incredibly high pain tolerance. I didn't have any of that at that moment. And so if I never remember that, I'm totally okay with that. But so and it's been a number of years, because the near-death experience was in 2016. And so there's three things that are right now are on my mind a lot. And it's actually like, it's incredibly perfect timing that our interview is November 1st, because November has been a very difficult month for my family and for me. And I've finally gotten to the point where I've turned it around, and November is truly the month of gratitude. And there's a lot of pain in November, but there's also an immense amount of gratitude, because God has saved me numerous times in November. And my ex-husband saved me numerous times in November. And I got to continue to be Ellen and John's mom in the month of November. So it's truly a month of gratitude. And there's some incredible lessons that have come out of this experience. And number one, somebody this morning when I was telling them that I was doing this interview asked me, so what's going to be your message? And I was like, I have no idea, because God's going to give that to me, right? In the moment of, so if I say, well, this is my message, that's me circumventing what God is going to give to me, right? So but what I told her was, and what I've been telling people for years is, if I get to go, anybody gets to go. And it's really true, right? Because, we've all done things that we regret. We've all done things that we think, oh, I've lost my ticket, right? but, but in that moment, when I'm surrounded by his glory, one thing I remember thinking is, wow, I'm here, and it's not that I knew that it was not like I was fully there, but I knew like I get the choice to go here. And, raised however we're raised, many of us just don't ever believe that we're going to be in paradise with God. And if I get to go, anybody gets to go, because I've had my thoughts that are not nice thoughts. I've done my things that are not necessarily that kind to people. And to me, that's the experiences where you have hurt another person, to me, are one of the worst sins. And, that's just my way of thinking. But if I get to go, anybody gets to go. So that's like a really big, huge lesson for me and other people, is we get to go, right?
What did it look like?
Well, the thing, I was surrounded by his glory, so I don't know. And so people have asked me in the past when I've shared it in private, did you see Jesus? And I always start out when I relate the experience by saying I was surrounded by his glory. I saw nothing. I sensed nothing other than that I knew that there was beyond him, and I knew I was surrounded by his glory. And I feel that it was so that I wouldn't see otherwise. And it's because my message is not what is beyond. My message is that we all get to go, right? And that there is nothing about death that we should fear. Because there are a number of people who I know who are Christian or not Christian who say, I'm afraid to die. And as I develop my message around this experience, one of the most important things I feel is death is absolutely beautiful. Death to our body, because I believe we never die. I believe, and I don't know all the workings of it, and I'm not even going to conjecture. But what I do know is that there is eternal life, and what is beyond eternal life and other alternatives, I don't know. And I anticipate that I might not never know, because we are not the mind of God, so we can't know everything. And I don't think we could even handle knowing everything. When I start to talk about it and I start to tell people, well, just imagine there are multiple dimensions. And so everything is happening all at the same time. And God knows everything because he's seen everything happen, right? That's how he knows everything. And can you even wrap your mind around multiple dimensions, let alone knowing everything that ever happened, because all dimensions are happening at the same time? And what is time anyway, right? So it's just too much for my little brain. And so I relegate that to God, because that's where that belongs, right? But it is true, I think, that it is all about, if I get to go, anybody gets to go. And isn't that comforting? Isn't that and number three, in the times since I've survived and been able to be Ellen and John's mom, and I'm moving into my next mission, it is also like the unbelievable love that God has for us. And that feeling of just being completely surrounded by his glory and his love, I've been able to bring that into my mind when I let go and just say, God, please surround me and let me feel that love. And just really release and try to not have any control over things, especially like when you're meditating. I can bring that back, right? Not say this is the experience that I want, but go into meditation and then it happens, right?
Into that memory.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's not only my memory, it's all of our memory, right? We can all have that experience if we can get ourselves to the point where we can release our control and our intention and just let God bring it to us, right? So they have that phrase, let go and let God. And I have come closer and closer to a truer understanding, or my own understanding of that phrase. And that is, if you completely give your control to God and say, use me and also bring to me whatever, it's unbelievable what he will bring to you. And what he brings to me is the memory of that moment. But I believe it's all in our memories, our deep memories, because we all come from that, right? So and that's actually part of my exploration going forward, is trying to find what message that I'm supposed to give to people from this experience. And, I'm now, like, my guys are grown and they're awesome. Because I always said to people, because they'll say, oh, your guys are whatever. I'm like, it has nothing to do with us. It is in spite of us. Like, I tried to be that way, like, not to take credit for them, because as awesome as they are, they can't be from us, because we're flawed human beings, right? My guys are full of grace, which I prayed for them, and I prayed to try to stay out of the way and let God influence them to be the best people that they can be. And I'm the proud mom, but I am proud because I actually really focused on trying to stay out of their way once I was past the, these are the rules and this is what you need to live by and the rest is up to you. And I believe that they, even though sometimes they don't even admit it themselves, I believe that they are following God's lead as much as they can in the way that I am following God's lead as much as I can. And, that's all you can want as a parent, right?
Yeah. Well, I really identify with your story because I was in heaven and I had three little boys at home and
Oh.
I refused. I was told it was my time and I refused. I was like, I got kids to raise. I cannot stay here.
Yeah.
And so what I came back with, my message, I think, was the gratitude because not everyone that dies gets to come back. And
Oh,
the
yeah.
fact that you and I mean, you were asked if you wanted to stay, but and he was like, no, and we got to come back and raise our kids. And that's no small thing. Like maybe a lot of people just take that for granted. And people like us can say, don't take that for granted because,
Yeah.
we shouldn't be here. We was allowed to come
There's
back.
also those times, and you probably had them too, when I was in the middle of something and I was like, oh, you chose this. So you can complain about it, but you did this to yourself. So deal with it, right? Because you have those moments. Well, I definitely had those moments where, especially when I was recovering from the surgery and I was on drugs and for anti-seizure and all that, and they mess with your mind. And I just said, Mia, you chose this. Like, yeah, you wanted to be here and be Ellen and John's mom. So, get up and do it because you wanted this, right?
Yep, we chose to come back.
And I wouldn't choose any other way. All the
Right.
stuff that happened since, I told you, my husband is no longer my husband. I am now like I've evolved to this where I'm just incredibly grateful that he was around to help me to recover from this. And I don't know what his intention was regarding all of this, right? But I'm actually now to the point where I can say I recognize there were times when he was in love with me the way in a way when he is not in love with me now. And it took me a long time to get to the point where I could even because it was too painful, right?
Mhm.
But I also, because of my experience, I believe, I know that if you unconditionally love, then you wish the best for everyone. And I do wish the best for him. And it's not like because if you love somebody, you only want the best for them.
Right.
And huge, I don't, I think it's part of the experience that I had, but I also, it could have been just the way he made me, right? But I am into people. I love people. I love seeing how they tick. I love helping them to be better and better. I love themselves. I love helping people to develop to be their best person. And that's why I do what I do, which is I'm a personal development coach.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the words that we use because we're in the world, but it's who I am. Like when I'm just around people and they talk about things, I ask them if they want some suggestions about things that they could do. And if they say yes, I give them to them. No charge. But I also make money doing this as well, right?
You
But
do that online?
I mostly do it in person.
Okay.
I am actually moving into some online groups, but I believe that the online groups will be led by other people and I will just be organizing it. You can't get the feels. Like, it's funny because because this is you and I one-on-one and we're focusing on knowing who the other person is. It's easier for me to get a sense of you And maybe that's the evolution that I need to go through so that I can do the online coaching. But most of the people I coach are either in person or over the phone. And I don't know why I feel them better over the phone than online, but that's where I am in my evolution, right?
I don't know. I'm just guessing. I wonder for me, like, because when I really want to focus and listen, I close my eyes, you
Hmm.
know. So, like on the phone, I can really focus because I'm not seeing, I'm not being distracted
You're
by
feeling,
whatever
yeah,
you're seeing. You're just picking up on the voice, the pauses, the feeling. Yeah.
that's great. So your near-death experience, how old were you when you had your near-death? I was 41. Oh,
Okay.
no.
Well, I was 25 with the ones where I had three little boys at home, but I had drowned at 5 years old too.
Hmm. Oh, so you're familiar.
Double major.
Double major. So I'm curious because what I tell people is I have always known the presence of the Holy Spirit. And even before I could call it a name, I just always felt a protective presence. And my thing is, he knew that I was going to need him, but he knows we're all going to need him. And maybe I have the memory of knowing protective experience, protective presence, so that when I tell my story, I I can help people to understand that they can feel the same thing themselves, right? And I've had a number of friends who have lost loved ones who immediately felt their loved one, and I've had some friends who didn't feel their loved one, and I've tried to help them to see if they could feel their loved one, right? Um, and interestingly enough, my father passed about 11 years ago. And in the very beginning, I could not feel his presence. His wife passed before him, and then he passed. And I felt his wife, but I didn't feel my dad. And my intuition was and is that he was off doing the soul work that he needed to do in order to heal. And lately, I can feel his presence sometimes, but he's not around me, I don't think that much, or I don't sense him. And my dad was like a really big personality, so if he was around, I think I'd sense him. He, he he loved people, and he was larger than life. And um, in response to all the trauma that he had been through, he was very much alive and larger than life kind of guy. Yeah.
So do you
So
think you come back with gifts from your NDE, like to get to be able to pick up on things like that or help
yeah,
people?
um, so it's funny. I actually discussed some things with Carlos, who you had interviewed
Uh-huh.
before, and he confirmed that actually during the interview, he named some things that God told him, and they are things that I felt that I brought back from the experience, but I wasn't certain. And once he said that, I was like, oh, yes, that's confirmation that. And I actually have them all written down in a list. And when it comes time for me to really detail account about my near-death experience, like as a written account, I will include those things from Carlos' interview. So I will say, and I heard this interview on NDE TV. Carlos confirmed. So the next thing I want to briefly touch on is that I am inspired to write some books. And it started out as a book that I wanted to write about my near-death experience. And it has actually, God led me to, it's 3 different books. And he gave me a piece of scripture um, that are the like the main title of the books. And it's Psalm 16:11. Um, uh, so the first is you'll show me the path of life. I'm not remembering it exactly. I have a block about it, and it's very strange. Uh, you'll show me the path of life, and so it's actually going to be easier for me to tell you the order of the books. The first book is called Fullness of Joy, and that's the middle passage of Psalm 16:11. And the fullness of joy is finally what I am actually living in right now. And so it's now time to complete the book. I actually have been working on the book for a while, but it's just stepping into being in the state of joy, no matter what's going on around me. So it's not that it's happy, happy, happy. It's joy, which is the joy from the Lord. And it's that knowing, that feeling of being close to the Lord and Him being around you and supporting you, no matter what's going on. So that no matter what's going on, you can be full of sorrow, you can be deeply shocked, you can be whatever, but you just know that He is with you, or the presence is with you, to be politically correct. I experience the Lord mostly as a male presence, and but I also know women who and men who say the Lord is a she, and we all know the Lord is neither. So whatever. So that is the middle passage, and then the first is the path of life, and the book I was working on when in the very beginning is called Your Path of Life. And it is about living, being guided by His steps, but with our steps ordered by God. So that's number 2, and number 3 is pleasures forevermore. And 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 pleasures forevermore is, at this point, what I interpret it to be is all those things clicking together, and you knowing that you're living in the kingdom on earth, which is as close as we can get to eternal life here on earth, right? And that doesn't mean nothing bad happens. It doesn't mean, stuff isn't going on around you. It doesn't mean that people don't betray you. It just means that you're fully immersed and fully aware of being in the kingdom and aware of the miracles that He does for you every day. The silly things, there's a gentleman I was speaking to about that, when you show up and there's just the perfect parking place.
Mhm.
And, some people say, well, that doesn't count. Of course it counts. It's a miracle, right? So he told me that's when I'm a parking princess. So, you're a parking princess.
And when bad things happen, sometimes I think, does God hate me? And then
No,
I remember, no, because He has a plan, and I just don't see the plan yet.
well,
I
and
will.
and this is my belief, and everyone has their own belief. The bad things happen because we're in the fallen world. And the bad things happen because there's dark forces out there that are trying to keep us away from loving and worshiping God. And as close as we get to God, the dark forces are going to try even harder to pull us away from God. They're going to try even harder to distract us from God. And so then when you feel like you're under attack, is when something really awesome is going to be happening, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so and that's like a thing that I tell myself now that I'm um, farther along in my journey, although I have more to go, right? Is that when it feels like it's really the worst and I want to give up, is when I know I cannot give up because I'm this close, right?
Yeah.
And then I deliberately do something to pull myself away from thinking that I'm a victim of anything, right? Because we're not a victim. And, I've prayed and prayed and prayed, like what to do when you feel like you're under attack. And one of the things that I do is I just start to say the Lord's Prayer, because that's the prayer he taught us to say, right? And I believe it's a very, very powerful thing, because it is one piece of very clear instruction that Christ gave us. Because you notice how he spoke in parables and sort of like riddles, and that's very clear. He said, when somebody asks, so what should we say? And he said, this is what you should say.
And I think our NDEs are so much like those parables.
Yeah.
Everybody's is different, but it just seems like there's a moral to the story, a parallel meaning. It's just like yours has been 6 years ago, but it seems to me like as time goes on, the more I understand the tiny little thing that I hadn't picked up on before.
Yeah, and the whole thing is, I think the farther along you go on your journey, the more that you get. And so I anticipate getting lessons out of that experience and other experiences to the day I am with God.
Right.
Then I'll have more lessons, right? What I said about I don't expect to learn all the secrets when I am with God in eternity, because I don't think that we're supposed to know everything. I don't think we can. I mean,
Right.
that would mean that we have the mind of God and we don't. And I don't ever anticipate, and I don't think I even want it. Like, I don't even want to know like the evil thoughts that people have. I'd rather not know.
Right.
Because I'm just like, I don't need to know. And truly, I don't need to know, because it's like that movie, The Green Mile, that man who had the gift of being able to heal, but he also had the gift of being able to look into people's mind, and he could see how that one man had mistreated little girl. And he said, I'm tired. I'm tired of
Right.
knowing. I
Tired
don't
of all
want,
the ugliness.
yeah, I want to, and through my life, people have called me Pollyanna. And that's not a bad thing, because I think there needs to be people who can see the good and pronounce the good news to people who are feeling low. I think that's one of the reasons why I'm back here, is to be able to be to help people to have hope when they are losing hope, and to be God's hands and feet. Like, the show that you're doing is such a service to people, because the more stories people hear about experiences where they were close to the end and they got to come back, well, there's a message that you have to say if you get to come back. I mean, to me, that's why you get to come back, right? And so as we're all figuring out messages that we're supposed to deliver, we're only making it better for the people who we are talking to, right? And the amazing thing is, when you start to become more public about your experience, you find out other people who've had similar experiences, right? Like today at breakfast, I meet with a group of ladies the first Tuesday of every month here at the business club to which I belong. And it's a random fellowship, but I call it fellowship, and I say it's not for networking, it's not for whatever, it's fellowship. And there was three women on one side, three women on the other side. And I arrived and we started talking, and then they were breaking up, and I was like, oh, just one thing I need to tell you. I said, I'm being interviewed by Peggy Robinson about my near-death experience. And people went, what? You never talked about talking about. And the two ladies on my side had near-death experiences.
Really? Well, maybe they'll want to come on.
Oh yeah, well, and so the woman who is sitting next to me has had 3 death experiences, and the woman next to me, she saw her mother die. And she had a vision of her mom dying, and her mom was somewhere and she was somewhere else. It was like a God vision, right? And and the fact that I said that I had the near death experience made her feel vulnerable enough that she could open up and tell about her vision. And we were like, yeah, so nobody questioned her vision. We're like, of course you did, like, isn't it beautiful? And that's actually the
Awesome.
blessings of your show, is that as people come on and they see your show, and maybe they didn't have a near death experience, but they had a different experience with God, where God helped them, and they can share it, and we can actually help each other to feel more. One of the things about my business is that I am a personal development coach, because there is a spiritual development aspect to how I coach you. And my business is called Finding Peace. And the reason why it's called Finding Peace is because if people are not interested in that topic, they're not going to come to me. They're not my client, right? And I'm very clear in my mind that who I want to work with are people who are open to developing themselves spiritually more, and that's who comes to me. And then I love every minute of working with the people I work with, because they're hungry for spiritual fulfillment, right? And whether they work with me for a little while or whether they work with me for the rest of my time on earth, we're all good, right? And when I mean work with me, I'm like, whether they read my book, whether I coach them, whether they check in with me every once in a while, whether we're friends. They just know what my intention is. And if you're not interested in it, that's fine. Because I don't need to know everybody in the world. I just need to know the people who are my people.
We can do what we can do. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
some people will roll their eyes and laugh at us, and others, it will mean a lot and help them remember their own experience.
Yeah. Well, and my experience has been with people who I might have even expected them to roll their eyes at me. They've been actually very open to and very curious. Maybe not interested enough to have a long-term relationship, but that's fine. It's just touching people, right? Because not everybody is meant, like, I can't possibly help everyone in the world, and nor do I want to. I just want to help the people who find me to be somebody who they can get a message from, right? Just like your show is out there and people choose to watch it or don't watch it, right?
Right. And I think it's nice when you're known to be a credible person. And so when they hear something outrageous, like a near death experience, coming out of your mouth, they also know you are normally a credible person.
Normally.
You know, I don't know, did I said that right? But,
Yeah.
because, when I first told mine to my ex, he looked at me and he says, I know how it sounds, but I know you. I know you're
Oh,
telling me the truth.
actually, that is one of the few regrets of my life, is that I didn't, there wasn't a time when I felt that I could share my near-death experience with my ex-husband. And it's not that I was withholding it from him or deliberately not telling him. It's that my role with him was more, he comes home and he tells me what's going on with his day. And also with my sons, they would tell me what was, so I just never shared it with him. And then we were at a party or something, and I was like, oh yeah, I had one too, to somebody who was talking about it, I think is how it happened. And I said, oh yeah, I never shared it with you. And I think I really hurt his feelings. And it was never intentionally that way. It just wasn't who I was in that marriage. And I actually I feel bad that I never intentionally said, oh, I need to share this with him, because it's an important part of my development. And at that time, I wasn't, I didn't actually come out and start sharing my near-death experience until after he, said we were done and all that stuff. And I think that part is actually, I don't think it's because I couldn't share it when I was with him. It's just my evolution with me, like developing spiritually, happened more after I was with him. And I don't think it's because I wasn't with him. I think it was just because I was now done with the parenting part of my life. Because I always said my first job is to be Alan and John's mommy person. And when I'm done with that job, then I will go on and do what I'm supposed to do for the rest of the.
Yeah, we put ourselves on the back burner.
And I was totally fine with that. Like,
Yeah. And then, yeah, and then when our job is done, and that's how it was for me when I got older, when the kids was raised and out of the house, I had time to think about me and my memories, and I would think, well, what is this strange memory I have of this and of this and that? That's when I started writing my book, because there's things you just can't walk up to people in the grocery store and start talking about, or even your family members to even. And the way I look at it is what you're saying is, I take it as there's me, the mom, the wife, the coworker, all this, but then there's this soul, and that's where these things happen at, is in the heavenly realm. We don't have our body and our mind, we have our soul. And I think as we get older, we get more in touch with our soul. Hopefully people do. I mean, I think people that are on drugs and alcohol and stuff, I really don't think they get there. I don't think they have that contemplation, the time with themselves to stop and reflect and put the pieces together in their life and see how the miracles all orchestrated and how.
Actually, I want to speak to that because one of the things that I've stepped into is helping people who are in recovery. And that is actually, it's halted temporarily because of COVID, and we're working it out how I'm going to help ladies again who are in recovery. But the thing, it does arrest a lot of your spiritual development because it's the devil trying to distract you from God. I mean, I told the ladies, so I led a personal development class at a recovery center for women from August of 2014 until COVID. And I always used to tell the ladies that they were survivors because they survived their addiction. And I believe it is a spiritual attack when you go into that kind of addiction, because it's distracting you from the good. And I believe there are moments when people, even in the middle of your worst addiction, I believe there are moments when God reaches for you and you experience God. And that is why the road to recovery is not a straight line, but sometimes you're not using the substance to which you are addicted, and then you use again. But then if you can stop yourself, or you allow God to stop you, you step back into recovery. But I don't, the saddest thing that happens is when somebody has a setback in recovery and uses a dose that they used to use before, and they overdose because their body got themselves used to a certain level, and then they're clean, and so they can't use at the same level, so they OD. That's what happens when you're clean and you OD most of the time. Sometimes it's because it's bad drugs, whatever. But and unfortunately, in the time that I was helping the ladies in recovery, that happened to a few ladies. And it's incredibly sad because they rallied so hard. But it is actually a thing, just like those of us who don't have an addiction that completely takes over our life, we also err in thinking that it's our will and forget that it's God. And one of the things I know that I have to do after going through the experiences that I've been through is that I have to constantly remind myself that my strength comes from God. It's not me at all. And that's actually one of the reasons I think that my story is my story, because I have all these examples of how it can't possibly be me fueling myself, because I am triple times walking on this earth because he is keeping me alive, literally. So I am in this month, I will be 17 years post my brain bleed of 10.5 ounces. 16 years post my massive stroke where I died and he let me come back. And I am 10 years past the life expectancy of somebody who has my brain disease. So that is emphatically letting everybody know that I am here at God's will. And I better get off my butt and do whatever it is I'm supposed to do.
Now, I thought your experience was 2016. Am I wrong?
2006.
Six. Okay, that's where a couple of 6 years. Okay, so you're further along in your journey.
Yes. And that's actually why I have a bit of the level of wisdom that I have, because I've had a long time to pray about it and learn about it.
That's it. Mhm.
Go back and read I actually found recently a journal that I had written in post the surgery. So let's say a year and a half after no, more than a year and a half, probably 2 years, 3 years after the brain bleed and 2 years after the stroke, because I was no longer taking the drugs that were making me fuzzy. I was on anti-seizures and I wasn't thinking well, right? They make you foggy. But yeah, I mean, there's so many lessons, and hence that's why I have to write books so that, Mie get on it, right? And I am working, I have the editor for the first book lined up, and I'm aiming at it being out probably not realistically by Christmas, but at least the first of the year.
Oh, wow, okay.
And then there's the second book that I was already working on, which will come out sometime after that. But the wonderful thing is that I belong to a self-publishing school, and I know that you need to take a year to market your book once you've written it. So I think 2023 is the marketing of my fullness of joy, among other things, right? So
Okay.
doing more podcasts.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me know when you get something published and I will add a link to it in this description.
And maybe by then you'll have a different podcast about other things. Who knows?
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I'm just really grateful to you for a chance to come on and tell my story for the first time. I know I'll be better at it,
You
as
did
I go
great.
along. Thank you. But there's the first time you tell stuff, it's not going to be as great as the 10th or 20th time you tell
I
it.
don't know. Sometimes I think I was better at telling my story when I was fresh because I don't want to say it sounds rehearsed now because it was never rehearsed, but I don't know. I just kind of look at some of the older ones when I first started telling compared to what I do now. And I'm just like, talk, 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 talk. It's just, I think I'm just like talking too much. And in the beginning, I was more reserved. And I don't know. I just think I was more personable when I was fresh out of the gate.
It's funny because I tried to find your episode where you told your story, And I finally found it right before it was time to pounce onto the interview with you. And I was like, I guess
Okay.
I wasn't meant to hear it first, right?
It's called, if you on YouTube, Peggy Robinson's NDE Part 1, and then there's Part 2. So there's two of them
Oh,
on YouTube.
okay. What I found was tells her story.
Oh, okay.
So
It
it
might be
must have been,
different. There's a bunch of them out there, but there's
yeah.
actual film a guy did for me. This Part 1
Oh,
and 2.
Peggy Robinson's NDE Part 1. Okay.
Part 1, and then there's another one, Part 2.
Okay. I will definitely, because I was looking in your shows. So,
Okay.
okay.
All right. Well, thank
Okay,
you.
well, thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'm part of me when I was going to do this interview, I was like, I wonder what the club is going to think about this. So we'll
Wonder
see.
what, who will?
The club.
Your club?
Yeah,
Oh, you got to speak your truth. Life's too short
absolutely.
to worry about what people think. I finally come to that conclusion after a long time.
Oh, yeah. Well, after some scandals that I've lived through that I've been part of, I definitely know like there's nothing you can do.
Yeah. You got to stick up for yourself
Absolutely.
and stick up for the truth, no matter what everybody is saying. You could be the only voice of reason in an entire building, you know?
Well, I hope not. No,
No,
to
but
be
I'm just mean, like, just like stuff we're going through right now. It's like, there's like so many lies and so many people manipulating. And it's like, it's okay. That's their thing. Well, in this darkness and this evil times that we all have, we can be that light. We
Yes.
can still be that light, even though it feels so dark. We're going through something awful. We can remember, but wait a minute, I can be that light. And I can find beauty in this situation because sometimes people respond to it. Sometimes people are just get all wound up in this hate and this, and then you can just bring a calm, loving voice of reason and it just change everything. So,
Yeah, well, and it's, just people.
and if not, then they'll burn us at the stake. It's always that.
Well, it's funny because there's a woman who I know who traces herself back to one of the ladies who was burned at the stake in Salem, Massachusetts.
Really?
Yeah, and I'm like, well, those women who were burned at the stake were healers. They were herbal healers, right? A lot of them. And it was medical doctors trying to force their way into a profession, right? And so if we're healers in this life, we probably had ancestors who were healers in other lives, right? And in the past, right?
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. And I'll get this out today and send it to you as soon as it's available.
Okay.
Okay. All
Thanks.
right. Bye. Bye.